Today on the Toddcast Cleveland, we are happy to welcome John Siegler, the founding bassist of Todd Rundgren's Utopia. He has also played on many Todd Rundgren solo albums, including A Wizard of True Star, Initiation, Faithful, and the live album Back to the Bars.
John has also played with Air, Mandrill, Hall & Oates, Edgar Winter, Rick Derringer, Roger Daltrey, and many more. John has also co-written the original Pokemon theme song and arranged the tune PokeRap with John Leffler when they both worked with licensing firm 4Kids Entertainment. Prior to that involvement, he had worked at Rave Music, which produced jingles and theme songs for commercials and television shows, leading up to his eventual involvement by 1998 with 4Kids.
He'd also done themes and music for Yu-Gi-Oh!, Ultimate Muscle, Kirby, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and many more. Again, welcome John Siegler.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. And again, I'm James Barney, and then this is Zach Wolf.
Where'd you get that read from? Is that a blurb in something somewhere that somebody wrote, or do you guys just wrote it?
I just wrote it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I wrote it. Yeah.
Was it bad?
Very accurate. Very good.
Okay, good. Good.
You only missed a couple hundred things.
I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. We'll get to that. But
I could have put a lot more, but I didn't.
No, that's okay. That's all right. Yeah. Less is better.
So starting from the top, tell us about your upbringing and how you got into music.
Well, I come from a very musical family. Going back to my grandmother was an excellent pianist. Both my mother and my aunt studied. My aunt was an excellent pianist in her day. My mother was a good pianist and an excellent flutist. And so basically my mother recognized when I was really young that I had a good musical ear, and she put me on the cello when I was in second grade. And the family story is that she realized that I had a good ear because I sang all the little kiddie songs exactly out of tune the way my older brother did. So in other words, I imitated him musically perfectly. So she realized that, and she put me on the cello when I was in second grade, and I played cello all the way through high school. And, when I was 14, I switched to guitar, 13 even. And then, I'm in my hometown of Great Neck, Long Island, and nobody was playing bass, so I played bass. And also the other guitar player was a better guitar player than I was.
For sure.
So yeah. I switched to bass.
That's usually how it works, right? Well, that's exciting that you started off in the bass clef. Yeah, and remained there too. Yeah, that's very cool.
I have the student cello that my father brought home, when I was when I was big enough to play a full-size cello, they bought a cello, and I have it.
Nice.
But I it's an incredibly difficult instrument, and and if you're concentrating on one thing, trying to go anywhere on the other thing is, just not. Yeah.
And if my memory serves me, not to jump ahead a lot, but I believe you played cello on Oates, right? Was it True Star?
Did I play cello on True Star? No, I played cello on the album, the White Album, when we did Faithful.
Yeah.
I played cello on Good Vibrations.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting.
I might have played on Oates, but I don't remember. I don't know.
So. I do just remember the credit of cello. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I must have. Yeah, I think it was on Faithful. Yeah.
So you pick up the bass. You're playing bass for people. Only guy in Long Island playing. What was the name of some of those bands that you were playing with at the beginning, if you had any?
We didn't really have any names. We used to just get together and jam and stuff. We never really did any gigs. There were other bands in the town that did Sweet 16s and stuff like that. We never did any of that kind of stuff. And the only thing I can remember is on the weekend that they had Woodstock, the festival Woodstock, we had all gone for a camping trip, me and some of my friends, and the plan had been to go camping, and on the way home, pitch our tent at Woodstock. And then our plan had been, the drummer and I, Mark Rosengarten, were going back down to play at a fashion show or something, some local thing. And then our plan had been to drive back up. So, and of course, they wouldn't let anybody off the thruway by the time the next day started. So we never went up there. And all my other friends went to Woodstock in my tent.
Oh, man.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's, I think, the only gig we ever really did.
interesting.
Yeah.
And at that time, you mentioned you were more raised in the classical style house as far as music went.
Well, what I was going to say is yes, like what you said. But my older brother, who was 18 months older than me, was a big music fan. He wasn't a very good musician, but he was a big music fan. In fact, that's how I met Moogie Klingman, but that's a whole nother thing. And so he started coming home with Bob Dylan albums, and my best recollection is one night or one Saturday or Sunday morning, he comes into my room. He says, "John, I just saw the most amazing thing. I saw the most amazing thing I've ever seen." And he had been to hear The Who at the Village Theater. And this would have been in 67.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe 68. I don't know exactly. And he said, it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. And he said they bashed up their guitars. And I mean, he said it was just incredible. So my older brother sort of was the first person that started introducing me to pop music, rock and roll, R&B. I mean, we always listen to radio and everything. I listened to radio since I was, little,
Mm-hmm.
But it was him that brought home, everything from Pete Seeger to Bob Dylan to The Who to,
Cool.
Well, that's very interesting compared to a lot of what I know about people of your age range, especially in Long Island, or everybody that had TVs. Everybody starts it off going Beatles, Ed Sullivan, 1964.
Well, Beatles, Ed Sullivan, but that was before that. I mean, I was learning music before that. We watched the Beatles, and the Beatles were enormously.
So they're the Beatles. Yeah, I mean, they're the Beatles.
But I would say prior or during, or I don't know how you figure the timing. The Beatles. I was in 7th grade when the Beatles were on television. So on Ed Sullivan. So I was aware of the Beatles and stuff. I was more of an R&B fan, to be honest. We had a couple of really good R&B radio stations, and Motown and Memphis and all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
But I mean, I love the Beatles, but I would say Dylan was huge for us.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the punk rock to all of that, or as it were, punk rock as it were. The ethos of the rebellion towards pop music at that time. So that makes sense that somebody such as yourself is really identifies with that and what's really artist at that time too. So your brother gets you into this rock and roll. You had mentioned that he may have had some connection towards Moogie for you.
Yeah, my brother. My brother had a band and I have a tape of the band, a cassette somewhere. I think I digitized it and sent it to him. And the band was centered around Moogie. And Moogie, because Moogie was my brother's age. I was younger. And so they had this band. Didn't last long, they didn't really do much. And my brother played rhythm guitar, and he was a good looking guy, and they stood him up there in front and stuff. But Moogie realized when he met me and the guitar player I worked with at that time, and we were in high school, Robbie Kogel, he saw, these guys are the good musicians. These guys are, and I don't mean to put my brother down, but these guys are real musicians. And so he wanted to play with us. And we used to take the train, and Moogie lived in the city. We used to take the train into the city, go up to his apartment. We used to sit in his apartment in his living room and jam on James Taylor songs. And I don't know whatever Moogie wanted to do, we just did, because he was older and he was, in charge. And so that's how I met Moogie. And I guess I was, when I first met him, I was probably about 14, and it just went and went and went and went.
How many years do you feel like you worked with Moogie total?
Well, we had this band Air, which you guys mentioned, and Mark and I, and husband and wife, Tom and Googie Coppola, and we had that band, and Moogie was the person that introduced us to them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first thing. Okay, so then we made that band. It was centered around her. She was brilliant and crazy, but brilliant. And we got a record deal with Herbie Mann's label on Atlantic. And then we became Herbie Mann's band, and we toured the world with Herbie Mann. I was 19 at the time. We were in Europe and the Middle East and Turkey and Israel and all these places. And we were playing Herbie Mann's music. But in the middle of Herbie's set, he would bring her out, and we'd do 2-3 songs of ours. And then she would leave. And so during that European tour, which was 1971, I think, the band broke up. And Moogie happened to be in London when we were in London. We were playing at Ronnie Scott's, which is the jazz club in London. And Moogie was in London. He was a good friend of all of ours. He's hanging out. We're all hanging out. Moogie sees the band is breaking up. We come home, whenever this was, end of August or whatever. And 2 days later, the phone rings. It's Moogie. I'm putting together a band. And my friend Ralph Shuckett is flying in from California. And I'm putting together a band with this drummer, John Siomis. Do you know who John Siomis is? John Siomis, one of the great rock drummers. And he was in Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels.
Okay.
And he came in, so it was, and I'll tell you more about John in a minute, but so Moogie puts together Moogie and the Rhythm Kings. That's me, Ralph, Moogie, and John Siomis. And Moogie had a loft in the city, and his apartment was in the back, and there was a big rehearsal space in front. And we put all our equipment in there, and it was a clubhouse, and we were there every day. Mm-hmm. And Siomis was the drummer. Now, Siomis played drums on Wizard of True Star.
Mm-hmm.
That's going forward. Anyway, we had Moogie and the Rhythm Kings, and Moogie had met Todd, and Todd would come by sometimes and jam, maybe once or twice. Rick Derringer used to come by. People would come by and jam because it was an ongoing thing. We were there practically every day.
This is long before Secret Sound, all of that.
I'm leading up to that. So what happened was Moogie and Todd asked Moogie, could he build Secret Sound in the rehearsal studio area of the loft? So, and it was amazing. He was there. He built the walls. We're there. We're playing. We're jamming. We're hanging out, whatever. And Todd is building this recording studio. Just the control room wasn't much bigger than a large bathroom,
Oh, wow.
And walls. And then he's wiring away. And when he's done, he wants to make Wizard of True Star, and we're all sitting on the other side of the glass. It really comes down to that, I mean, obviously he knew that we were going to be able to execute his music. He knew that clearly. But it was that kind of, I don't know, just that simple. We were there. He built his studio all by himself, wired the whole thing, got that 1-inch Stevens 16 track, and there we were.
Wow. Backing up a little bit.
I don't know if I skip forward or back. I don't know where I am now.
I'm the king of moving around.
Yeah.
You'll figure that out on the next hour. But to slow down, you grew up in Long Island. At that time that you were with Moogie and the Rhythm Kings, what was the New York scene like?
Oh, it was great. I mean,
I can't imagine because I'm a 27-year-old. New York's always just been crowded, and to my understanding, in the early 70s,
New York was just as crowded then.
But it was more dingy, is what I was getting at.
Yeah, it was kind of dingy and stuff. But look, I lived up on the Upper West Side, and I sort of split my time between my parents' house and another apartment that a friend's family owned that I lived in for a while. But as far as the music scene in New York, it was great, because I mean, one of the great places was Max's Kansas City. Now, we used to play there all the time. And so at Max's Kansas City, there was upstairs, there was a small club where bands played. And downstairs was like the happening groovy David Bowie, Mick Jagger hangout steakhouse, and we were just happy because we would go downstairs. Part of the pay was we got to have a free steak dinner downstairs. But that place was unbelievable. I mean, one of the things, do you guys know who Andy Kaufman is?
Of course.
Or you? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Andy and Moogie grew up. Andy grew up in our hometown. Moogie and Andy knew each other.
Really?
And so a lot of times we would open for Andy, and then we'd come on and do his Elvis Presley thing.
Oh, wow.
So, and this is that Max's. Yeah. I mean, it was unbelievable. I saw Springsteen and the E Street Band upstairs at Max's Kansas City. There were maybe 100 people there, maybe not even 100 people. I mean, it was unbelievable in those days.
So moving back towards A Wizard of True Star, at that point, Rundgren was just somebody who knew Moogie, was kind of, you guys jammed with every once in a while, right? To my understanding.
Yep.
Yeah. And what kind of this is 47 years ago.
Don't remind me.
Okay. A long time ago. What was the air of that whole recording experience? Do you kind of remember what it kind of felt like recording that?
It was great. Todd would, first of all, it was never, all right, we got a session. Like, we were all, later in life, we were studio guys. You had to be there, set up with your instrument plugged in and ready to go at 10:30 in the morning. Wasn't like that. It was like everybody sort of wandered in the early afternoon, and we all came in. And when Todd was ready, he would show us something. Would show us Sunset Boulevard, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. And he'd show us, and we'd learn it, and then we'd start working on it, and we'd play it. And by the end of the day, we had a track of Sunset Boulevard, or a portion of it, because Todd was very big on editing stuff together. And I don't remember exactly if we played that piece from the beginning to the end. And I'm talking about there's two versions of Sunset Boulevard on that record. Or maybe there's two versions of, there's one where he played all the instruments, and there's one where we played. Or maybe that's a different song. I'd have to look.
International Feel.
Oh yeah, International Feel. That's the one that had the two versions. Yeah. Where he played, the synth opening, and then he played everything. Then we did it again.
The second part, Le Feel International, that's the version that y'all played.
Yeah, that's the band. You can tell the difference,
Sure, of course. That makes sense.
And that was me, Moogie, Ralph, Todd, and Siomis. And Todd would just literally just sit down at the piano and show us, play the piano part, and I would pick up his left hand, and the guys would learn the chords. And Ralph was very good at coming up with a little sort of a little part that was, ornamented whatever else everybody else was doing. Moogie usually played the basic rhythm piano part and I think Todd played piano a lot on some of those, like International Sunset Boulevard. But it was very relaxed. It wasn't, it was because we'd been going there every day for months, maybe over a year. So it was just, to us, it was just what we were doing that day. And then there were a million recording sessions going forward after that was just the first one, Wizard of True Star.
Is it true that the first song that y'all got together and recorded was Sometimes I Don't Know How to Feel?
Might have been one of the great ones. Might have been Sometimes. Might have been the first one he showed us.
I don't even know where
I can't remember. I can't remember. I love that song. What a great song. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible
yeah.
song. Really
might
powerful.
have been the first one. I don't know. The cool thing about it was, and this is one of the reasons that some of us really learned how to be good record producers, was that Todd never sang the song to us. I don't know if you guys are aware of that.
Oh, really?
He sat down at the piano and he played the song. And in a lot of cases, I'm not sure if he even had written lyrics and melodies at that time. So all we knew was the rhythm track that he showed us. All the vocals, all the singing that happened later when we weren't around.
Yeah.
And then the cool thing was we'd come back the next day or a few days later or whatever it was, and all of a sudden he's playing us Sometimes I Don't Know What to Feel, with all the vocals,
Oh, wow.
and all the extra parts and all that stuff. But when we made the tracks, and this was true of just about any recording I ever did with Todd, all the other stuff came after, and we did not know what it was going to be. No idea.
To my understanding, the way TR does it, and this is really interesting to hear from you, obviously somebody who worked with him even that long ago, is that yes, he does all of the music first, and then he lays out all the vocals at once, the harmonies, everything. So that's really interesting that was even a part of his process then with all of that analog equipment compared to the last almost 30 years of him just being in a room with a computer.
Yep. That's the way it was done. It was all about layering, and that's what production is. That's what record production is. It's all about layering, especially now. Now we're not even in the same room. When I do bass parts for people, they send me a track, I put bass on, I send it back to them, and then they've already sent it out to a guitar player and a drummer. I mean, that's the way you make records now.
Yep, that's how I do it too.
That's how I do it, especially in COVID.
Yeah. Well,
but even before that, that's what we were doing.
There was a band in the year 2000 called the Postal Service.
Uh-huh.
And they were doing that kind of stuff with emails or sending each other packages of tapes or hard drives.
Yeah, or ADAT tapes. People did that. I never owned an ADAT, but I know people were doing that. Here, I'm gonna send you this ADAT, put your part on, and send it back if you have.
I think it's really interesting that even a lot of people in my generation, when we work on music, well, how are we going to do it? Oh, we'll just postal service it. Which means I'll send you an email with the bass track on top of and then I'll layer it with this, and then we'll do that, and then you're good to go.
That's what we're doing all the time now. Yeah. Everybody has most of the musicians that I know, my contemporaries, and like the guys that are in the band I play in now, they all have these kind of setups. And so when I'm doing productions on various projects that I'm doing, and I just send this stuff out to this guitar player or that guitar player, or I just did horn sections where I sent each individual horn player parts and sent them out, and then they all came back separate, And it's not the best way for an ensemble horn section to be recorded, but these days you don't have much choice. I mean, you want them all in the same room, but if you can't, you do what you have to do.
So during a Wizard of True Star sessions, you were still playing out, right?
Yes. During those sessions, or right around that time, is when, I guess right after that, that's when we met Kevin, because Siomis left. Or I guess he got hired by Frampton. The end of this John Siomis story is that he was in Peter Frampton's band and played drums on that live album that was the biggest selling album in history at the time.
Of course, Frampton was alive or whatever. Yeah.
So he had left. We had met Kevin, and so we liked Kevin. And Kevin and I played it with Buzzy Linhart. You know who Buzzy Linhart is? You know Moogie's song "Friends"? That was
I know the name.
I do know that song. I do know that Moogie song.
You gotta have friends. Yeah, that was Bette Midler's kind of theme song. I don't know if she still uses it or a theme song, but for years it was. Moogie and Buzzy were good friends, and Moogie and Buzzy wrote that song together. And so, Kevin was the drummer in Buzzy's band, and Buzzy had a sort of local following, and they needed a bass player. So the next thing I know, I'm playing in Buzzy's band, And that's all, I'm a little hazy on the exact chronology of everything, but the other, so we were in Buzzy's band. So I almost left. So then we brought Kevin into the Todd fold. I was also, I was doing a lot of local gigs. One of the things you have to understand, at that time in New York, there was none of this gear. Everything was recorded by a band. Mm-hmm. And so there was a really thriving studio business for guys like us. And so, at a lot of different levels. And so we would be doing somebody's production, publishing demos or something at some studio. There were studios all over the place. And so we were doing a lot of that. I was playing in Buzzy's band. Eventually, I guess this is later, around the time of the Todd album and when we did Sons of 1984, I was in Mandrill. Do you ever hear of the band Mandrill? You guys are so young. Mandrill was sort of the East Coast answer to Santana at the time. And they were like an Afro-Cuban rock band from the Upper East Side of Manhattan, in Spanish Harlem and stuff. And they were pretty successful. They were pretty successful. If you go on YouTube, you look for Mandrill, look for a song called Fence Walk, and you'll see me playing bass with Mandrill on that dance show. What the hell is the name of that dance show?
Soul Train.
Yeah.
I watched it yesterday. That's how I found out about doing research.
Oh, that's good research, man. That's excellent. You saw that video yesterday?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
So,
it was awesome. You guys were killing it.
And what happened was I was in Mandrill, and I got great Mandrill stories, but we won't go there. When Todd decided that I've jumped forward now, sorry, to the Todd album. When Todd decided that he wanted to do the Central Park gig where he recorded all the people in the audience, he wanted us to come out, and this is after the first Utopia tour with the Sales Brothers, and that all, I guess, vanished. And I'm sorry, I've skipped ahead, but I quit Mandrill so that I could do the Todd thing, because I wanted to be with my buddies and I wanted to be part of that. The Mandrill thing I loved, but it was more of a gig. You know what I mean? Whereas all the other guys, Ralph and Moogie and Kevin, they were all my friends, my best friends. Ralph and Moogie were my best friends. So I wanted to be in that band. So
you mentioned Sons of 1984, and then we'll back up a little bit. I found out recently. You know who was in that crowd?
Who?
Joe Satriani.
Oh, was he? Yeah. I guess he's a lot younger than us. Yeah.
And he's even on the back of the Todd cover, album.
Oh, you can see him in the picture?
You can see him, yeah. And then I only found out about it because somebody brought that to him to sign, and he circled himself in the picture in the background and says, "That's me, Joe Satriani."
That was a great place to play. Awesome. And we used to play there a lot too, with Todd and with Moogie and the Rhythm Kings at the Woolman Memorial Skating Rink concert series in the summer. That was the best. That was absolutely the best. That was the ultimate.
It looked really cool. Just looking at pictures and stuff like that, it looks like a lot of those pop festivals from back then. Just really open and a lot of great music.
When we did Sons of 1984, it was in the daytime, but the gigs were at night, in the dark. So the lights and everything. But I guess Todd was able to get the place during the day. Maybe there wasn't a gig that night, I don't know, but it was a daytime gig. So, but I mean, Utopia did on Todd's birthday at that venue. That was unbelievable. We set fireworks and all that, and Todd and I were just sitting on the lip of the stage, we were just noodling and watching the fireworks.
So going back a little bit, A Wizard of True Star comes off, and to quote TR, it was like a bomb went off. Is that how it was for you too? Or did you feel like it was an immediate success, or were you just happy to be a part of it,
Well, the thing was that after Wizard of True Star, Todd put together the version of Utopia with Hunt and Tony Sales and Jean-Yves Labatt. And we weren't part of that. And the only reason I think we weren't part of that was that we didn't dress like rock stars. And we didn't dress like British rock stars. Todd was different than us. He dressed like a British rock star, okay? We didn't. We wore jeans, and I dress the same now, right? We were just hippie rock and roll musicians. Hunt and Tony Sales were really good-looking guys that dressed like British rock stars who I don't even know what their musical level was, but that's what Todd wanted. And I understand that. And we kind of understood that, really. I mean, were we disappointed? Probably,
Mm-hmm.
But we understood that. And so he went out on tour with them, and that was, I don't know what happened, but I know technologically it was very difficult.
That's what I've heard too, yeah.
And
ambitious. We'll call it ambitious.
Ambitious, yeah, that's a good word. And maybe the music was a little too much for the Sales Brothers. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But that ended, and once he was ready to go live again, he asked us to go. And that gig in Central Park was the first gig that we did.
To my understanding, I think when they had done that first, quote, Utopia tour with the Sales Brothers, they were still being billed as Todd Rundgren. Yeah,
I don't know if it was called Todd Rundgren in Utopia or not. I don't know.
To my understanding, because that was when they were doing the helmets, and the double neck guitars, and
Jean-Yves was inside the geodesic dome, I think.
And ambitious, right, for 1973 or have you. So you're asked to become a part of it, and then that's when you hit Secret Sound again and start doing Todd Rundgren's Utopia, the album, as it were.
You jumped ahead. Todd was producing a lot of acts at that time. First of all, he did the Todd album. Then we did Sons of 1984, because Sons of 1984 is on the Todd album. Then he was doing some various others. He did that band, and it was a huge success, Foghat. He produced Foghat.
Because they were also on...
I don't think he did it. He might have mixed it. I don't know where he did that. I'm not sure he did that at Secret Sound. But he did Hall & Oates. He did War Babies. And that was Todd, John Darrell, me, and Willie Wilcox. And that's how we met Willie Wilcox. And that's how I met Willie Wilcox. And at the same time, shortly after, Kevin decided he didn't want to be a musician anymore. And he left. And then we had such a great experience doing War Babies. I mean, War Babies is a great record. And it's a direct descendant of Wizard of True Star, as far as I'm concerned, with different songwriters, but production-wise, it's a straight line. And Willie and I really hit it off. We really played well together. And so we asked Willie to join Utopia, and he did.
And Kevin went to pursue his degree and worked for his family's company.
Yeah, it's called Restaurant Associates, was his father's company, and there were some very famous restaurants in New York, one called Longchamps that he owned, and then eventually he started a chain called Beefsteak Charlie's.
Beefsteak Charlie, that's what it was. Okay, I thought it was either that or like Mr. Meat or something.
Yeah, and I think Kevin. I mean, you'd have to talk to him about it. We've had talks about it, Kevin and I, because we're still very close. We talk all the time. I think he just didn't like the life. And I think also there was a lot of things with his father, and, you'd have to talk to Kevin about it. I don't want to put words in his mouth. So Willie joined. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I've got this wrong, because Kevin played on the first Utopia album. Wait, I screwed this up a little bit. I think
you're even right, because I am looking back here. It goes Something Anything, Wizard of True Star, Todd, and then Utopia and Initiation.
All right, so that makes sense. Yeah, because Kevin played on. So we probably maybe what we did. You know what? I'm sorry. It's a long time ago, so I don't really have all the timeline right. But we went out on the road for a while before we did the first Utopia album.
Yeah, and that's when you were doing the 4-hour shows, and
Todd started with the tape recorder.
Yes. What was that like for its time?
You know what? It was a little weird, but it to us, it was just like, oh, Todd wants to do it with tape recorder for a while. Okay, fine. I mean, it was Todd. I mean, the guy could do whatever he wanted to do. He did,
Yeah,
And-
that
and
was
he-
definitely ahead of its time.
yeah, and he was playing tunes. Oh, like a big moment on that part of the concert was when he did Zen Archer, right?
Right. It's yes.
Okay.
It's so interesting.
And I don't know if you ever saw this concert. So the tape is going, and Todd is running all over the place, avoiding the arrows, And we used to we'd go out in the audience. We just hung out, and then, so he did his whatever 45 minutes or whatever, and then there was a break, and we all changed, and then and we came out and we did whatever it was, Black Mariah and songs like that, and some stuff I guess from. And we always played Just One Victory. Every Todd concert has Just One Victory at the end. Yeah.
Yeah. No offense to Todd, but I've heard that song at so many Todd shows. And keep in mind, my first show ever was a Todd show, but I usually leave because I've heard it so much.
Yeah.
Somehow,
but it's such a classic song.
Yeah.
I know.
Anytime you can clap at the end, like it's a classic song, you got to play it every time.
Yeah.
But I'm more there for Fair Warning, like if he plays that.
We used to play Fair Warning.
That's crazy.
Warning. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Fair Warning's a great song.
It's my favorite song of all time.
Classic Todd, R&B, Todd stuff. It's classic.
One of the last times that I saw Todd do a solo tour, I think the last time I actually saw him was the White Album tour when he was with everybody. So, but the last time I saw him, they did Fair Warning. That was the first time that I'd ever seen it in my life. Like, I cried, just tears.
Yeah.
I'm in the nosebleeds. I'm just like, everybody else was there for We Got to Get You a Woman, and he goes into and Bobby Strickland's playing sax. Yeah. And I'm just in tears. And I was at the bar next door after the show, and Prairie Prince was there. But I did thank him. I said, thank you for being a part of it tonight and playing Fair Warning. And he goes, I've been playing with Todd for over 30 years. And this is the first tour that we've done Fair Warning on.
I wonder why he didn't want to do it before. I don't know.
At least with Prairie. Yeah, I don't know. But there's so much material, man. It's hard, so much material.
Yeah.
So you're on tour with Todd. You're doing the half shows with him. You're playing a lot of those songs. And then you're recording the Todd
the Utopia album.
And you're piecing together all of these tracks. Is that how it went down?
Very much so. The first thing we did was Freedom Fighters. That was a typical Todd session. Except that he didn't have an intro. I wrote that intro. Bam, 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 bam. I wrote that. And I showed it to him. And he said, "Oh, we'll use that for the intro." And boom, it's on the record, And but the rest of the song, that was a typical Todd recording session. But then we started working on, and the Utopia theme existed. So
because to my understanding, the Hunt brothers also had rights to that song.
No, there was another guy whose name I can't remember now. I'd have to look on the record. That has some writer's credit on that with Todd. You'd have to look at the writer's credit, but and I know that they probably played that on their tour. We changed it a little in the rhythm section because the original version was like a bolero, bum, 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 bum. But we didn't do it that way. We changed the rhythm. I don't know why. Maybe I did that. I don't remember why, but we changed it. And so we recorded that. Then Moogie and I wrote Freak Parade. And we showed all those sections of Freak Parade to Todd. And this is one of the great things Todd did. He said, "Oh, okay, let's do that." So we're recording all these sections. There's a section in the middle that I also wrote that's like that kind of funky jazzy where there's vocals. Do-do, 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 boom, boom, boom. Of course, there were no vocals on it when we did it. And a couple of days later, we walk in and we hear those vocals over that track. And that track had all kinds of odd time bars and all kinds of stuff. And the vocals were so fucking brilliant. You could have knocked me over with a feather. I mean, They were so good and so jazzy sounding. He sounded like a jazz singer on that, you know. I mean, he was like, you know, I mean, the fucking guy. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't. It was so good. It was scary, you know.
I want to say something about going back to Freak Parade. That bass line was at the end.
Thanks.
It's probably my favorite bass line of all time.
That was, you know, boom. You know
what I'm talking about?
Something like that. I have to remember the notes, but yeah, that was all.
Yep.
That was all written. It was we wrote that. You know, Moogie and I wrote that, and I made up that bass line. It was just part of the composition. I mean, that bass line occurs earlier in the Freak Parade, and then that was Todd's idea. That was his whole concept, the Freak Parade, and probably we did the back after he wrote the vocals and decided it was called the Freak Parade, because then he wanted the battle and all that, and we did the battle. You know, so it was sort of a mixture of a bunch of music that Moogie and I wrote and Todd's concept of the Freak Parade all in kind of got mashed together, and then Todd edited it all together. Same way he did the Icon.
How many sessions did the Icon take? How long did it take you?
I don't know, a couple weeks probably. I really don't remember, because each little section was written by somebody else. You know, Ralph wrote all that opening. Todd wrote we used to call that song. Todd wrote that, and the next thing you know, you're into Ralph's piece, the piece that comes after, and you know, then there's all kinds of things, that pieces of music that we had lying around. You know, the one boom bum 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 boom ba da 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 ba da 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 ba da da da. That was Ralph and I wrote that like 2 years before, and it was called The Pacer. You know, and well, how about this, Todd? Boom. Okay, that's in. Let's use that. You know, it was like, you know.
With Another Live, why did the song The Goon or Baseball never get put on a studio album? Or was that just the nature of Utopia? Just having stuff on the road and seeing what made it to the studio and what didn't?
First of all, I don't think they were as good at tunes. That's first of all. That they just weren't as good pieces of music. They were pretty self-indulgent, and you know, they were good concert pieces. You know, then the bass player got out there and ran around a little bit, and Kevin always liked to do a big drum solo and stuff. But they were good for live, but you can only put so much time on a record, you know. And there were better pieces of music. So there was Another Live, which Ralph wrote the music for. And then the one that Todd and I did together, which I'm trying to remember the name of.
Seven Rays, yep.
Seven Rays. That's the song I was trying to think of. I wrote the whole middle section of Seven Rays. Todd, and I showed it to Todd. And a day or two later, he shows up with the whole beginning of it, the song.
Mm-hmm.
And then we put it all together, and it ends up with the song again. And then the song comes back, and so Todd and I wrote that. We used to do the round that we did, which I also can't remember the name of.
The Wheel.
Sorry about my memory again. The Wheel. We did that live, and that was Todd's. Then what else was there on that record?
Heavy Metal Kids.
Live, The Wheel, Heavy Metal Kids, Todd song. Yeah. So we recorded that live. You know, the truck went around with us for whatever amount of time there was, and I guess they picked the best takes. And we used to go into the truck after and listen and get depressed because we didn't like the way we sounded, or somebody made a mistake, or we, you know. Recording those tunes live.
That's how they did that? Was with those mobile studios? Okay. I always wondered if it was like a sound booth thing or like that. And I only know about the trucks from the Deep Purple song. So we made records with the mobile. Like that's the only reason why I know about that. So
yeah. No, they were trucks. The truck went. Bearsville owned a truck. And the truck the truck was on the
wild.
tour
That's
with
crazy.
us. And then the sound check was always more laborious because they were getting sounds for the truck as well as for the house, and
Nice.
there was a truck with there were two 24-track recording tape recorders in there because they had to overlap in case they ran out of tape, so they were always running. One would be running, and as soon as they saw they were getting close, they started up the other one,
That's wild. That's wild. Bro.
I guess they had a way of switching.
So at that point, another live comes out. I think chronologically, Ralph at this point decided to depart, and then the great Roger Powell joined at that point.
No. Roger was in the band with Ralph. What happened was that Jean-Yves was it was clear that Jean-Yves shouldn't be in the band with us. He just wasn't up to the task. Roger is on another live.
Right. I remember now. Yeah.
Not Jean-Yves. And Jean-Yves was a great guy, and he was a lovely guy, and he was cool looking and all that kind of stuff, but he didn't really do anything musically. He treated Todd's guitar, and he triggered the Utopia thing and stuff like that. And, but he didn't. When Roger arrived, that was really a revelation because Roger came in with that big mulligan. And I remember the day he first came into the studio, and we walk into the studio, and there's this guy with this huge mulligan, and Todd is talking to him and stuff, and we're working on something. I can't remember what we were working on, and Todd said, "Well, Roger, can you get some kind of Celeste sound or something?" Boom, Celeste sounded great. We were all like, "Oh yeah, this guy." Plus, Roger could play. Roger could really play, and he was a great soloist. So he was a great addition. So there was the 3 keyboards, bass, drums, and guitar. That was the.
And then I guess it was after another live that had Moogie already departed at that point, or no?
No, Ralph and Moogie departed at the same time, and Willie had joined. So at that point, Willie.
Right.
Was in the band.
When we talk about him in this album, I keep waiting during this album period, I keep waiting to call him John Wilcox. I have to remind myself. No, he
John Willie Wilcox. He was a great guy. I love Willie. We were good friends.
And again, y'all had met him because he had done War Babies with Hall & Oates, right?
Hall & Oates.
We wanted to do something more exciting.
You'd have to ask him why he made that switch. I'm not sure what was going on with Hall & Oates at that time because I don't know why I was in the band. In other words, I don't remember. Maybe they didn't have a bass player, or maybe Todd wanted me, or I don't know why I was on those sessions. You have to ask those guys, And the other thing that happened with Hall & Oates, although obviously I got with them later, was when they made their next album, which had Rich Girl and Sarah Smile on it. They called me to play bass on that album, and I had a scheduling conflict because Utopia was going on a tour at the exact same time. And I really wanted to do that record. But when the push came to shove, I was always going to go with my buddies because that's always. So I didn't get to do that record. Lee Sklar did it, I think. So they didn't lose much on that one.
So at that point, Todd Rundgren's Utopia becomes Utopia, and it's basically just the 4 of you: Willie, yourself, Roger, and then TR, and
2 background
Luther
singers.
Vandross, and what was the other guy's name? Darn!
I forget.
Darn! I was really. I feel like I know it. I feel
it's listed. Yeah, it's listed someplace. I could go find it somewhere in my attic. But just for a minute, Luther Vandross was a background singer for Utopia.
It's cool. It's really crazy to blow people's minds with that too, because it really expands the lore of like how Todd's hands have been all over the last 50 years of music. It's insane.
I have pictures of that European tour of people on the bus, and I have pictures of Luther. And Luther didn't look anything
of course,
like what he ended up looking like. But Luther, it was very clear. Luther was, not only was he brilliant, but he was very assertive. And one of the things he did was, when we sang in Just One Victory, when the backgrounds are going, hold that line, baby, hold that line. Well, Luther changed the melody. He said, no, don't sing it like that. That's not the way it goes. And he pulls me aside and he says, we're going to sing it like this. Hold that line, baby, hold that line. Get up, boys, and give it one more time. And we used to sing it like that. We didn't sing it. Todd sang it just straight notes, just hold that line, baby, hold that line. You know, and Luther, no, we're not going to do it that way. You know, Todd never said anything. Todd was cool with it, you know, and I remember him, and he was just great.
That's amazing.
He was
That's
great.
Nice.
Great.
So, and then at that point, y'all were doing what would become Initiation, as far at least the first,
which was a solo album.
At least you were on the first half
album.
of the. I should say the first half of Initiation.
I know I was on the song Initiation. I don't remember what other songs I'm on. But that was a great session because that was at Media Sound, which was one of the big recording studios at the time up on 59th Street, 57th Street and 8th Avenue. And Media Sound I had worked there quite a bit because the first Air album got recorded at Media Sound. It was a 2-drummer session. There were 2 drummers on that session. And one of them was Bernard Purdy.
Bernard jazz Purdy? Guy, right?
Bernard Purdy is the was Atlantic Recording R&B New York City drummer ever. He was the man. He was totally the man. And you can go on YouTube and check out Bernard Purdy, but he played on all of Aretha's stuff. He played on everything. He wasn't a jazz player. He was an R&B player. You know, and he played on everything, and there's great stuff. There's great Bernard Purdy stories all over the place. But it was Purdy, and I'm trying to remember who the other drummer was. It's probably listed on the album notes. It might have been Rick Marotta, who was another great New York drummer. Both him and his brother Jerry. Jerry and I were in Hall & Oates together. But it was a thrill for me. I had never played with Bernard Purdy, and he was famous. He was what we all wanted to be. We all wanted to be New York studio guys at Bernard Purdy's level. Or Chuck Rainey. You know who Chuck Rainey is? The bass player for Steely Dan on Asia and all those records. One of the great bass players, maybe the greatest bass player, with the exception of the Motown guy. And that's what we wanted to be. We wanted to be those guys, you know, and we tried.
So Initiation comes out. I assume you're still touring with.
Right. And I think the full band was still touring at that point. I think the full Ralph Moogie and Roger. I think everybody was in the band. I think it was after maybe that tour that everybody left. I can't remember. I can't remember.
1976, you do Some of Faithful with TR.
Right. We did the whole album. I did the whole album. Great album.
And
up in Woodstock. We did that in Woodstock because Todd had moved to Woodstock. We all moved up to Woodstock. We used the Woodstock studio, so Albert's studio there. Oh, you know how we did that record? Now that you mention it, I remember. We did the half of the record, the side of the record that was the remakes of famous songs. Okay. We did that in Woodstock. The other half, the original songs, Love of the Common Man and Cliché and those songs, they were done on the road. I think Todd had an obligation. You'd have to ask him, but I think he might have had an obligation, or maybe he just was inspired and wanted to record. And we'd be on the road on the day off, and they'd find a recording studio, and we'd go into the recording studio and record whatever Todd wanted to do. I remember we were down in Texas. We were recording "Verb to Love," one of Todd's great songs.
"Verb to Love" is on that album, yeah.
And and I remember Todd yelling at us nicely, but yelling at us. We weren't playing it slow enough. He wanted us to play it so slow. It was so hard to play.
Yeah, that's another one of my favorite TR songs as well. Yeah. Kasim was doing his Kasim Sultan Utopia earlier in the year before the pandemic, and he played that song, and I was like, thank you. Like, you don't hear this song ever. Like, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, good. Kaz and I are good friends, and Kaz called me a month or two ago and asked me to play on his record. And just like we were saying, they sent me the tracks. And I said, Kazim, what do you want? I'm very flattered, but what the hell do you want me to play on this for? He said, John, we want you to play on it. We think first of all, you play it great. Second of all, it's a historical thing. And Kaz and I are very close, even though we really never hang out together or anything. But when we're together, we're like blood brothers. And he called me and I said, well, of course I'll do it. But I can't believe you're asking me,
And when Cass says
so
he means he and Phil Thornalley, because they've been writing that album together, which is very cool.
Yeah. Who I never met, never talked to.
Interesting cat, very interesting career. That Phil Thornalley. Yeah.
He's British.
He was in The Cure. Yeah, he
was in The Cure.
When the original bass player, he and Robert Smith had a falling out. Phil Thornalley had produced some of their stuff before, so he went on and just kind of filled in for him until he came back like a year or so later. So, and then he went and produced Thompson Twins.
I think that if I remember what Cass said at the time was that I think it was Phil's idea. He's a bass player also. I think it was his idea to have me play, or he saw it as a kind of a cool historical thing to do, and I knew that I guess Chasm had told him that we were good friends.
Cool.
He'd be
happy. That's so cool.
Yeah. One other thing about Chasm. Chasm and I are the only people who ever played bass in Utopia. And so we sort of have a relationship that is unique. It's completely unique. And I always think about that when I think of Chasm, because when the minute we're on the phone or the minute we see each other, it's like we're like totally blood brothers at that moment, It's just a unique thing, that's all.
Looking more ahead, I think he filled in for Moogie for those Utopia shows towards the end in 2011. So is that the only time that you'd play with Kaz?
Well, Moogie never went. That's a sad story, but Moogie never went on the road with us. He never went in 2011, and so we needed background singers. Kaz and Jesse were both on that tour as background singers, but Moogie it was very clear to us that Moogie could not go on this tour during the rehearsals. It was actually clear to me and Ralph even before that, and we called. Before Todd came into town for the rehearsals, we had called Todd and told him that we didn't think Moogie was going to be up to it, but and then when we were in rehearsals, and this is a very sad story, Moogie came into the rehearsals really late. He had these voluminous charts that Ralph had made, and they were paper flying all over the place, and he was trying so hard to play, and it was a mess. And finally, Todd went out of the room, and I went out of the room, and Todd and I are talking, and then finally, Todd, this is one of the great Todd moments in my mind, was everybody sort of gravitated into the production office, and we're all sitting there, and Todd says to Moogie, Moog, it doesn't look like you're going to be able to do this, and Todd, he was so nice, and he was so supportive of Moogie, and Moogie was so sick, and Chasm was crying because his wife had passed away, and Ralph we were all really upset, and Todd just handled it like so beautifully, and he said, Moog, when we come into New York, you can play with us when we come into New York. But it was clear that there was no way he could come with us on the tour, and so that was it. And then Moog died during the tour.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear these incredibly humanizing stories about TR, because TR to me, and speaking towards myself now more for Zach has had more human interactions with him. To me, he's as real, like I had explained to somebody the other day. He's been such a big part of my life for 27 years that he's as real as Buzz Lightyear is back there. It's so when I hear these incredibly humanizing stories, because I only know the man for his work, right? Yeah, you know him on this incredibly personal level. Like I said, like you said, you're one of the only other Utopia bass players other than Kaz. But I mean, you're part of this club. It's very unique.
Yeah, we're definitely part of a club.
Yeah.
We're definitely part of a club.
And you get together and you have this language that only
I'm-
you two could have, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
Man.
I think all the musicians who have played with Todd are part of a club, especially the ones that were with him for longer periods of time. And when Todd was going to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, when they thought he might get in last year, they wanted to organize a concert. And they asked me to organize this concert. And the idea was that we were going to get in touch with everybody that ever played with Todd or everybody that ever played on one of his records. And we were going to be constantly shifting musicians on and off the stage to play whatever they had played on, which was a cool idea. It never happened.
All right. So going back, 76, Faithful comes out, still doing Utopia. But I think maybe it was around this time that you had departed.
Yeah. Well, don't forget, Moogie and Ralph were gone. Right? And Moogie and Ralph were still my best friends. I still did a tour when we went down to making a quartet with the background singers. I did the next tour. So Moogie and Ralph were gone. I had just gotten married or was getting married. I don't remember exactly what time of year I quit. I called Todd and I told him it was the greatest experience in life, but I didn't want to tour anymore. I was with my wife, Joni. We were living in an apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And there was a lot of elements to that. One, I didn't want to tour. Two, like I said before, what I wanted to be was a New York studio guy. That's what I always aspired to. And so this was my chance. I had a great resume with the Hall & Oates stuff and the Todd stuff and all the various sessions I've been doing. And like Todd produced a record of Fearless Cavalieri from the Rascals that I played, that kind of stuff. And so putting all of that together, I decided I didn't want to tour anymore, And even so, about a year later, Todd did the Back to the Bars tour and he got us all back.
That's right, yeah.
For that record, So, and it was also during that time that I found Chasm for him in a sense, because my friend Michael Kamen, do you know who Michael Kamen is?
No, that name does sound familiar from Chasm interviews though.
Yeah, because Michael Kamen was a really well-known film composer and record producer in New York. And I had known him for years because at one point in my life, this is a band we skipped over. I went on tour with the New York Rock and Roll Ensemble with Michael, which was Michael Kamen's band. And I was on the phone with Michael because I was doing sessions for him. And I said, well, I'm going to leave, anybody that might be good. And he said, oh, I know this kid, Chasm is much younger than me. Chasm Sultan, he's great. He'd be perfect. And so I hooked that up.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting to hear that connection. Cause I do remember during a couple TR interviews, he's saying, yeah, and then we found Chasm. I don't know how he came into the band. There's that connection right there. That's great.
Yeah, that was how it happened. If you ask Kaz, he'll tell you that Michael came and told me and gave me Chasm's number, and maybe I gave him Chasm's number, and that was it. And Chasm, to Todd's credit and Chasm's credit, walked right in, man. And he great-looking kid who, I'm sorry, I don't mean to call him a kid. Great-looking guy who played really well and sang his ass off. He was the perfect bass player for Todd. Perfect. And still is, I mean, if I'm Todd, I would probably hire Chasm ahead of Siegler, because Chasm fits the bill better. He's a better band member, in the sense he plays great and he sings his ass off and he's really good looking. And I'm an old, fat 70-year-old Jewish guy, It's like,
oh goodness. So I'm assuming you left the band and then you start moving into your dream, which is becoming a producer. So walk us down throughout the 80s. What kind of work you were doing there?
Well, we were doing some producing, some songwriting. Ralph and I were partners. We were very close. Moogie and I sort of had a falling out after a while. Moogie got pretty crazy, and there's a lot of stories about him that I'm not going to tell.
I've Googled him.
Yeah. So I'm doing sessions. I'm working for a lot of people. The 80s, Daltrey, I mean, all kinds of sessions. Ralph and I produced a couple of...
To remind the crowd, which Daltrey albums did you do? Did you do the one...
I'm on 2 of his records. One is called his first solo album, Under a Raging Moon.
I love that album.
That's a great album.
That album. Do you want to know why I love that album, though?
Yes, I do. Why?
Because how my dad introduced that album to me was, hey, this is Daltrey's album. It's supposed to be a nod towards Keith Moon as far as like the title goes. But yeah. Pete Townsend wrote all the songs. Oh, good. Well, I'm interested.
Well, he didn't write all the songs. He only wrote one song.
I know he didn't, but that's how it was when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And my dad would introduce it to him, and I'd be like, "Oh, sold! I love Pete Townsend. This is great."
Yeah, that was making that album was great. That was really great. And then the next solo album he did called "I Can't Wait to See the Movie," also has some great songs on it, but the band wasn't as good. It was close. The drummer was great, but it was a different experience than the first album. Same producer, Alan Shacklock, who I met doing a Meatloaf album. I had gone over to London to do a Meatloaf album called All American Boy, because a bunch of my friends were on that. Bobby Kulick was the guitar player in that. You know who Bob Kulick was? He passed away recently. Anyway, so I met Alan Shacklock. He brought me over for the Daltrey stuff. So that was then the whole Daltrey experience.
Yeah,
that was after Hall and Oates. That was after I was in the Hall and Oates band. I was in the Hall and Oates band in the late 70s.
Right.
And by the time I got to Daltrey, that was the mid 80s. We're jumping around again, but what can I tell you? You know. The other big part of the 80s was being a studio player, and I'll lead you into how I got into the whole Pokemon thing.
Okay.
Which is, if you were a studio musician in New York during the 80s, an important part of the way you made a living was to play on commercials. And every morning at 10 o'clock, there were probably 30 or 40 recording sessions going on in Midtown Manhattan of people recording commercials. And they all needed bands. And so the really successful guys would take a 10, and it took an hour. They were 30-second things, or an hour 20. They book you for an hour, hour 20, hour 40. It was a union thing, how long you could be in the studio and how you got paid. And so I was doing that. And the natural progression of that was, as guys who were writers and guys who had that kind of mental outlook, realized that the real money was getting made by the guys who were writing the commercials and singing on the commercials. And so Ralph and I got very involved in that. Mm-hmm. And Ralph got a gig as being the main arranger for this gentleman, John Leffler, who we're getting back to now. And Ralph got me on those sessions, and it was clear that if you wanted, at this point, we're young family guys with children and stuff. We want to make money, and we don't want to tour, and we don't want to do all those things. So Ralph eventually moved to LA because he's from LA, and he got a good job at Columbia Records out there. And so I was able to step into his chair as an arranger for John Leffler. At the same time, in the late 80s, Norman Grossfeld, who was the head producer at 4Kids Entertainment, was looking for guys to write music, and he wanted guys like us, guys who were writing the big hooks, you know, the guys who were writing the really super commercial music that was going to appeal over a wide range, which is what our job was, you know, to write those kind of things. And so I don't know how John and Norman actually met, but somehow they met. And we started writing for Norman's projects at 4Kids Entertainment, which was prior to Pokemon. And there were a couple of TV shows they were doing that were prior to Pokemon. And then finally, he calls us up and he says, we have this new band, it's called Pokemon. I'm going to send over a bunch of material for you to read. and he sends over a big thing, and it was mostly like businessy stuff, like 40 million people in Japan are watching the show every morning, and that kind of stuff. Real breezy kind of promotional stuff. And we had no idea. Norman is making a sales film. His job was he would make a sales film so they could sell Pokemon to a TV station that would then broadcast it, which was the WB at the time. And so we made that, and we wrote Pokemon, which was, as far as I'm concerned, a Who song, in terms of the rhythm section, and or it was, born from that, So that's that's the line from the mid 80s to the late 80s to the early 90s that got us to Pokemon.
Huh. And what now, obviously I know Zach and I know the lyrics to a lot of TR songs, but I think more people than less people know every word to the Pokemon theme.
I know.
What is that like? What is that like? Like,
it's a little weird because in my mind, it's almost embarrassing. I mean, in other words, it's cool and everything, but is that even remotely the best work I've ever done? There's not a chance of that. You know what I mean? I'm proud of it. Look, I don't know exactly how to explain this. It was my job. It was something I had been prepared for going all the way back to 1970. And I was prepared for it all the way up. And Todd has a huge part of that preparation and learning how to produce and learning how to write and what's a good song and what's a good melody and all those kinds of things to finally get you all the way up to I want to be the very best, which is John Leffler's line. It's not my line. I don't think I wrote much of the lyrics, but
still, yeah, I know every
rock and roll.
I know every move and crescendo of that song just as well as I know damn lyrics too.
How old are you guys?
Yeah, we're both 27.
I'll tell you a great Pokemon story, which is my younger son. I have a 40-year-old son and I have a 31-year-old son.
Okay.
My 31-year-old son, my younger son. So at that time he was in like 3rd, 4th grade, whatever it was. Okay. So the first episode of Pokemon is completed. And 4Kids wants to do a big splashy debut. So they rent a movie theater in Midtown Manhattan. And we're all invited, and I bring my son, Charlie, the 8-year-old or whatever he was. And we go and we watch this show. And we watch this, and I didn't have a clue. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't understand. I even wrote the song. I didn't understand what the show was about. When I asked Norman what the show was about, he said, "John, it's about selling toys. That's what the show is about."
Oh no, it confirms that episode of South Park.
Is there something in South Park about that?
Yeah, they say the same thing. They say the same damn thing. It's well, the show's not about anything other than selling toys.
Yeah. And don't forget that was the business of 4Kids. The business of 4Kids was not producing television shows. The business of 4Kids was licensing the brands. And so they hit the mother load with Pokemon. But the thing is, my 8-year-old son, like you guys, saw this thing and he totally got it. And he's immediately asking a million questions. How did this and what, and what did we know? We didn't know anything. We didn't, we had no idea, So
and did you compose, you and John, did you also compose the Yu-Gi-Oh theme for 4Kids?
I wrote the Yu-Gi-Oh theme with Wayne Sharp, who was one of the writers in our music company.
And that's more close to my heart. Yu-Gi-Oh.
Well, Wayne is freaking brilliant, and
that's a pretty interesting theme. It's very out there.
Yeah, and Yu-Gi-Oh, that's me through through some kind of filter, so it goes Yu-Gi-Oh.
Is it really? That's awesome.
Oh my gosh,
it's
like crazy.
And then there's that bass break in the middle of it.
Yep.
Yeah, I had played that on something else, and then Wayne sped it up. Yeah, so that was written by me and Wayne.
That's very cool.
Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh. And then
And please tell me, I mean, I know 4Kids is done, but please tell me you still get like money from that
well,
crap.
you know what I did? It's a long business story, and it's not really that interesting. But when Four Kids kind of fell apart in 2009, and they had a great run for 10 years. In 2009, they let me go. All the senior people. I was the musical director at Four Kids for 10 years, and actually 9 years, whatever. And they just didn't have the money anymore. They didn't have the money to pay us, and so I left, and I left my studio that I loved. It was a beautiful studio, except all the gear was mine, so I picked it all up, and it's all in here. So what happened was in 2011, I met a good friend of mine who's a lawyer, and because what happened was that Four Kids had its own 4-hour slot as a network. We were in complete control of what went on the air for 4 hours. So it was all our stuff, right? What happened was that over the air and cable collided, over the air died, all the kids' stuff went on cable. It was very clear to me that I wasn't going to be making the residuals that I had been making, the songwriting residuals that I had been making from public broadcast. So at that point, I met a lawyer friend of mine, said, we can sell all this stuff if you want. So I sold my share of all those songs, and there were a lot of songs,
I'm sure.
to another publishing company for a nice amount of money, obviously. And to this day, I don't think they've recouped it, because it's just the whole nature of how you make money in the television business as a musician has completely changed since the early 2000s. Because when we were making really good money, now you make pennies on the dollar compared, because streaming, and it's a completely different thing, So I still get occasional checks from international and stuff, but nothing significant, But I'm happy. I got,
Yeah.
I'm good.
It seems like much like your career, you were in the right place at the right time.
You know what?
with a
You're
lot of that.
absolutely right. You are absolutely right. In fact, when I became the musical director of Four Kids, it was because John Leffler and Rave Music had built these studios and offices down on 23rd Street. And as Pokemon got bigger and bigger, Norman needed space, and John's company was not doing well. And Norman moved into that facility. I went from being the main producer at John Leffler's Rave Music to being the musical director at Four Kids Entertainment, and I never even left my studio. It was just the name changed, And you're right. I was always the right guy at the right time, and the only, not to toot my horn, but you have to deliver if you're the right guy at the right time.
Yeah, and hard work too.
And you have to work hard and deliver and have the personality and all that bullshit,
Absolutely.
But
yeah. Damn if that's not all true. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So wrapping up, because
Yeah.
we know you got to get back to it. 2 more questions for you. And of all of the themes or songs you've ever written, what's your favorite one?
Wow. Well, it's not I Want to Be the Very Best. I'll tell you that. I love the Yu-Gi-Oh theme. There's a short-lived show called Funky Cops, which was a French show. It was a disco show. And Norman and I wrote a theme, and I've always said, for a lot of reasons, that's one of the best themes I ever wrote, because it did the job perfectly, and it was a really good song at the same time. Because the thing about a theme song is, like what Norman always said, I want the kids who are playing in the kitchen, when they hear the first 3 notes of the theme song, I want them all running into the TV room, and then hold them there, And so that song for Funky Cops, which is not well known, did it perfectly. And it tells the story. It reduced into 40, 50, 60 seconds. The whole show is right there, So that would be one. I could probably think some others, but.
And then for the theme for our show, Toddcast Cleveland.
Uh-huh.
As John Siegler looking at Todd's work solo, what is some of your favorite pieces of his from over the last 40, almost 50 years?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Yeah. That's probably his last question.
You know, there's a song that he did with that girl that I love. It's not a theme song for your show, but it's It Could Have Been Me. You know that song?
Of course.
What a great song. There's a classic Todd song that goes, and I wish I could remember the name of it. I'd have to look around a little to give you the name. That's not that old, but that I love, and I can't remember the name of it. Maybe I'll send you an email if I can think of it. As far as the stuff from the early days, Love of the Common Man,
Mm-hmm.
Freedom Fighters,
Mm-hmm.
and Sunset Boulevard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, guys, there's so many that if that's
There's
a
so
tough
many, I know,
question.
yeah.
You know, that's a really tough question. I mean,
And I know it's tough.
and
And,
also,
and then
I-
all of,
you know,
all
I
of
don't-
ours would be different too. So.
you know, I'd have to look at a list and then pull a song off. Seriously.
Well,
you
no,
know?
that's when you start going for, oh, there's a dozen. Here's a dozen I like.
Yeah. No, but I mean, if I saw a list, I would go, there's this one song, and hold on a minute. Let me just see one thing here. Change Myself.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And that's classic Todd. You know, it goes to that big choral thing at the end. In you know, that's a great song. I mean, this, you know,
Stuff, right? Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, that whole block of TR from Nearly Human to The Individualist. I mean, that's my personal favorite. You could have given me a list of those,
Yeah,
and I would have been
Todd.
like, yeah, click. These are all my favorites.
Todd is so brilliant. You know, I can't say enough about the guy. I really can't.
Of course.
All right, guys, I got to go. I'm sorry.
John, no worries. We're really thankful you took the time with us today, and you're very cordial.
All right.
And
send
good
me
luck
an
to
email
you.
if you have any other questions. Send me an email or whatever, and I'll try to answer. Or if you want to talk again, we can do that too. Whatever you want to do.
Excellent. Thanks, John.